All right, so it doesn't look like the bill to send $2,000 checks to some Americans is going to pass in the Senate. Even if the bill does come up for a vote in the Senate, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has indicated that the standalone bill that passed in the House will only get to the floor for a vote in the Senate if it's tied to two other bills having to do with making it easier for Trump to disregard the 2020 election results and reforming Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which would essentially allow social media companies to be sued for misinformation that gets posted on their platforms. Tying the standalone bill for $2,000 checks to these other unrelated bills makes the package extremely unlikely to pass in the Senate with Democratic support. Doing this enables Mitch McConnell to follow through on his promise to bring $2,000 checks to the Senate floor for a vote, a promise which he made to Trump in order to get Trump to sign the government funding package containing $600 checks into law earlier this week. By tying the $2,000 checks to two other policies that are strongly opposed by Democrats, McConnell has created a win-win situation for himself, where he can fulfill his promise to Trump while simultaneously knowing that the bill won't pass, since Democrats will no longer support it as long as it's tied to those two other policies. Even though the checks are supported by Trump, a few Republicans in the Senate, and 44 Republicans in the House, Democratic and Republican leadership in the Senate has teamed up to stop Bernie Sanders from blocking the Senate's vote to override Trump's veto of the $740 billion 2021 defense budget. Only 6 Democratic senators joined Bernie Sanders in attempting to force the vote on $2,000 checks in the Senate by trying to block the Senate's override of Trump's veto of the 2021 NDAA. Including Bernie Sanders, those Democrats were Elizabeth Warren, Chris Van Hollen, Jeff Merkley, Ed Markey, and Ron Wyden. Those are the only Democrats in the Senate who said, "You're not going to give $740 billion to the military, more than the next 10 countries combined," while simultaneously refusing to send just $2,000 to struggling Americans in the middle of the worst public health crisis in American history. 46 Democratic senators joined with Mitch McConnell and the rest of Senate Republicans to push through the $740 billion defense spending bill for 2021 without forcing the standalone bill for $2,000 to the Senate floor for a vote. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris was one of those Democratic senators. Remember that she supported giving $740 billion to the military before giving $2,000 to struggling Americans when she tries to run for president again in 2024. On the Democratic side, the move to block Bernie's attempt to block the Senate's override of Trump's veto of the NDAA was led by Democratic Senator Dick Durbin. Sanders is trying to block the Senate from passing a $740 billion defense budget until they pass a bill to give $2,000 checks to the American public, and Democratic leadership in the Senate is teaming up with the Senate Republican majority to stop him. It's the definition of a moral failure when Democrats and Republicans in the Senate will support spending $740 billion on a bloated defense budget, but refuse to give Americans $2,000 in direct cash relief. This is just another example of how leadership within both political parties supports funding for endless war over funding to provide assistance to the American public during the worst public health crisis in American history. The unfortunate reality is that even the best actors in this situation, the people who have been fighting to get $2,000 checks to the American public passed, are still to blame for the situation we find ourselves in. Because even as $2,000 is better than nothing, it's better than $600, which is also better than nothing, a one-time $2,000 check is not nearly enough to provide adequate assistance to the American public, especially at a time when millions of Americans are more than $5,000 behind on rent alone. A one-time $2,000 check is nowhere near enough to provide them with the assistance they need. So even the best actors in this situation are advocating for inadequate assistance to the American public. And they've been forced into advocating for this inadequate assistance because of failures that they have made earlier on in this crisis. One of the main reasons why adequate assistance has not been offered to the American public throughout this crisis is because at the start of it, elected progressives gave up their leverage to force the bipartisan ruling class to provide adequate assistance to the public when they refused to make Medicare for all or a $2,000 per month universal basic income preconditions to passing the more than $4 trillion slush fund for corporate America that was included in the CARES Act that passed at the end of March. Because elected progressives allowed this $4 trillion slush fund to be included in the CARES Act, it took 9 months for another stimulus to be passed. And this second stimulus offered even less assistance to the American public than the first inadequate stimulus did, largely because elected progressives gave up any chance they had at forcing adequate assistance, such as Medicare for all or a $2,000 a month universal basic income, into the bill when they refused to make those policies preconditions to passing the more than $4 trillion slush fund that was included in the CARES Act. By giving the bipartisan ruling class everything they wanted during the first negotiation process, elected progressives made it all but certain that adequate assistance would never get to those who need it most, since they gave up all the leverage they had to bring the bipartisan ruling class back to the negotiation table.